In this part, we are going to talk about the different types of walls and then the methods for managing the thickness and the materials of the walls that we haven't talked about it until now. Alright, let's go and see the different types of the walls in Revit. We have three main types of the walls in Revit. The first type is basic wall. The second type is curtain wall. And the third type is stacked wall. But what are these? What do they mean? The basic walls are the building walls. I mean, anything that you call wall is a basic wall. For example, concrete walls. Anything, any wall you see around yourself is a basic wall. So, the basic walls are and the building walls. Alright, now curtain wall. Curtain walls are some exterior walls that cover a building. And if I want to say an example, you might have seen some of these views that are completely made of glass. Modern buildings, mostly, like this. You see, this is a curtain wall now. Even the composite views, they are kind of a curtain wall too. And we will talk about it later. Now, stacked wall. What does stacked mean? It means group of things on each other with the same type. We also call it the combined walls, like this. Now, what does it mean? It means that, for example, we have a wall in the yard and it's made of three parts, as you can see, just like this. Now, this difference that these walls have could be thickness or a material. For example, we have a wall with different thickness or with different materials, like this one, or like this one. Both thickness and the materials are different. These are stacked walls that we will talk about them later. Now, we call this classification of the walls family. Alright? Family. So, the walls are three types. Basic wall family, curtain wall family, and stacked wall family. And they cannot be increased either. Now, each of these three types are classified into smaller types. For example, basic wall, which is the subject of this episode. We will talk about the rest of them later. Now, basic walls. For example, we have 20 centimeter brick walls. Alright? Or for example, we have 10 centimeter pottery walls. Or 30 centimeter concrete walls. Or even 20 centimeter concrete walls. And a lot more. Now, what are these called? These smaller parts of, for example, basic wall. These are called type. So, if you want to introduce a wall, for example, we say that the type of this wall is 20 centimeter brick and it's from basic wall family. Or, for example, this wall is 10 centimeter pottery and it's from the basic wall family. Considering these examples, we understand that the parameters that determine the type of a wall are what? Can you say? That's right, one of them is thickness and the other one is materials. So now we want to analyze the features of the type of the wall. So we were supposed to talk about the features of the types of the wall. I have prepared two kinds of wall for you here. And I should tell you that these have layers, for example, structures and finishing. So let's write it here. The features of the layers of the wall type. That's right. Now you might think that why the layers of the wall? Well, can we just say type of the wall, not layers? Well, it's not possible. We know the wall by two things. What? The thickness and the material. So when our walls have layers, can you say the material of this? So what should we do? We need to present the features of each layer separated. For each layer, you will say what is the thickness, what is the material. Okay? For each of these separated features. So that's how we call it here, the layers of the wall type. Well, I said that number one is material. Number two is thickness. That's right. But there's also a number three. Number three is the function. Now, what does it mean? What does it do? Well, I should tell you that this is actually the function of each of these layers in the wall. Alright? Now, for example, we say that the plaster in here is for the finishing. Or, for example, the brick is the structure of this wall. So, we say that the function includes 5 parts. Number 1 is structure. Number 2 is the finishing. 3. Can you say what it is? You can see it here if you pay attention. What is number 3? That's right. 3 is thermal or insulation. Now, you might not be able to guess number 4 and 5. So, number 4 is substrate. Like what, for example, the mortar. And number 5 is the membrane layers. Now, what are the membrane layers? Actually, the membrane layers are the layers that have no thickness, like for example, the color, like the bitumen, like the plastic. We usually have nothing to do with this one, and it's not used in the projects. So, now let's review all of these one more time because they're really important. So, the function includes 5 parts. Number 1 was structure. Number 2 was finish. Number 3 is thermal insulation, that if you remember at the beginning I said only thermal because it's just a thermal insulation. Number 4 is substrate. And number 5 is the membrane layers, which are famous for being thin or actually no thickness. That's why we call them membrane layers. They have no thickness. So that was the functions of the layers in the wall. And I should tell you that later we will understand how important and useful these layers can be. Now the finish. The finish includes 2 parts, finish 1 and finish 2. Alright. Now, what does it mean and also where can we use it? Alright, imagine that this is the corner of a wall. Let me draw it straight, it was bad. So, the material of this part is stone. This one's material is, for example, plaster. Now, you think which of these stone or the plaster will go until the end? I mean that you think the plaster first continues and the stone sticks to it, or the opposite? Which one do you think? Well, it's not actually much different. What's important is that which one you want to continue. Well, we need to be able to determine this in the Revit. Well, the truth is that the material which is heavier is executed first, and in here the stone is heavier, so it continues first, and then the plaster. So the finish that continues until the end is finish 1, and the other one is finish 2. So let's say this in this way, that we can determine the way of the installations of the finishes by finish 1 and finish 2. Now let's go for the material management. Number 1 is the surface pattern. Number 2, does anyone know number 2? No one? That's right, we call it the cut pattern. And number 3 is color. That's right. Now, the kind of the surface pattern must be model, and the kind of the cut pattern must be drafting. As you can see, well, now you might wonder that what is this surface pattern or this cut pattern anyway? Well, I'm gonna give you an example so that you can understand it perfectly. So imagine that I have a brick wall, so I draw a brick wall first. Now, if I want to show you that this is a brick wall, what should I do? Well, I draw some patterns on it, just like that. In this way, I draw some patterns. Alright. Now, what do we call this? This is the surface pattern. Now, what does it mean that I said the kind of it is model? Would you agree if I say that anyone who comes here and sees this wall will understand that this is a brick wall? For example, there's a person here who is not an architect at all, is a usual person. He will understand this is a brick wall if he sees it. Why? Because this is a real pattern. That's why I said the kind must be model. The pattern that their kind is, they are showing a real thing. Now, if I cut this wall, or let's just say I draw its plan. Let me draw it here so that you can see better. So if I draw its plan, do you still draw this kind of pattern? No. For example, I draw a double diagonal pattern, not this pattern. So what is this pattern now? That's right, this is the cut pattern. Now, what does it mean? The kind must be drafting. So, is this pattern in here showing us that this is a brick wall? No. So, based on the previous example, if you have someone here who is not an architect, he will not understand this is a brick wall. Therefore, we say that the cut patterns that are drafting are contractual. It means that we have agreed that the diagonal double pattern is for the brick wall. So let's remember that the kind of the surface pattern is model, that means it should be real, and the kind of the cut pattern is drafting. As you can see, this is a very unique feature for Revit, that when you're in the material, you announce that if it's cut, show this pattern. If it's not, show this pattern. And where can we see surface pattern, for example, in 3D, in the view, and even in the cuts? Why? Because when you cut it and look at it, you still can see the surface of that wall. So somehow we can say that surface pattern can be seen everywhere. Now, despite all my explanation, we're going to draw a wall with one layer now. And for now, we have nothing to do with these, not yet. So, 3 one-layer walls. The 20 centimeters brown brick wall. Next one is 10 centimeter beige clay wall. And a gray concrete wall, which is 30 centimeters. Well, let's go and draw these 3 types of walls so that you can understand everything I've explained to you until now, and it's going to be a very good practice for you. So let's go, and then we will come back for these multiple layer walls. So let's design these 3 types of walls. Where do you think we should start from? That's right. Designing new types of the walls is exactly like the windows and doors. In the doors and windows, we duplicated a default model and then entered our own features. So we go to all and choose a simple default model. Definitely use one of these generics. Generic means a simple one layer wall. Don't use these ones that have several layers. For example, here I say generic 200 mils. Now, what is the next level? That's right, the edit type, because we want to create a new type. You can also use this preview. What then? That's right, the duplicate. Now it's time to write a standard name for it. For example, imagine that now we want to make that concrete wall. So, first of all, 3 letters of the name of the project. For example, Revit or VT. Then a slash. And then we imagine that this is the first type of our wall. So W01. Again, a slash. And the material of the main part of the wall, which is concrete. Then the thickness, which is 30 centimeters. This is a standard name for this wall. And it doesn't have a finish either, so I click on OK. Now, to enter the setting, from the structure you will click on Edit. Alright, you can see the structure in here, and then click on Edit. Now you can see thickness, material, and the function here. So let's start from thickness. I click on it and enter the right thickness, which is 30 centimeters. And also pay attention to your unit. Here's where a lot of people make too many mistakes. For example, they write 0.3 despite the fact that the unit is millimeters. Pay attention when you started your project, what was the unit? And then work based on that. My unit was meters, so this is how I wrote it. Now let's go for the material. To manage it, click on it once, and then you can see these 3 dots. When that appeared, click on it, and then your material browser palette opens. Now, what material do we want? Concrete. The materials you want to use in Revit, either they are in the list of the defaults or not. But it doesn't matter that much because you can duplicate one of the materials that is a bit like it. For example, I want a concrete, and here I can see something similar. And I don't know what kind it is, but I pick it up, I right click on it, and duplicate. We never change the default materials, we let them be. We should just duplicate and enter our own settings. Now we should write a name for it. The right names for the materials are like this. At the beginning, 3 letters of your project name, a slash, and then all the features of your material. For example, this is concrete, and it's gray, or anything else about it. And then click on Enter. Now the settings that are related to material, and we talked about it. The first one is color. When you want to manage the color, this use render appearance might be activated. If it is, you can't change it anymore. You need to inactivate it. And then you can choose any color you want. Now, let's go for the patterns. I said that there are two kinds, surface and the cut. The surface has a foreground and the background. And for the surface pattern, we just need foreground. There's no background. I click on it and then I said that the pattern type must be model, which means a real pattern. So we click on model and choose a model from this list. But for concrete, I don't need the surface pattern that much, so I click on no pattern. Now, the cut pattern. The concrete has two patterns. One of them is this type, and another one that I already showed you is the diagonal pattern. I click on background. I said it's drafting, concrete, and this is the background. And in the foreground, I click on it and choose, for example, this one. Now, the combination of these two patterns show the concrete. Okay? And as you can see, this is exactly the right pattern for the concrete. Then we go to the function and choose which one? That's right, the structure. And then click on OK. Now this wall is added to our list. Now let's go and design the 20 centimeter brown brick wall. So you tell me, what should I start from? That's right, first of all you need to click on the wall icon. Many people click on edit type before activating the wall, and then they duplicate too. Well, now the view is being duplicated, not the wall. You did not even activate it. So you go to the wall. It's been half an hour that we haven't saved our project, so let's save it. The wall. Choose a simple model. You can also use your own wall. It has a simple base too. So pick generic or your own wall. Then you go to edit type. It's not bad to have the preview too. After that, duplicate. We write W02, and we should also change these. Brick 20 centimeters. Just like that. And it doesn't have finish. Then I enter the structure and edit the thickness 0.2. The material, I click it and then I open it. Now imagine that you have no bricks in your list. So what should we do? We need to duplicate this material we have here, this concrete. What really matters in here is that it's not something bright like glass or water. For brick, you can duplicate the stone or the concrete, and it's not much different. So I duplicate it and say this is a brick and the color is brown, all the features. Just like that. Let me tell you a point. While naming the materials, do not write the thickness. Don't write, for example, a 20 centimeter brick, because we want to, for example, use the same material for a 30 centimeter wall. You can write the sizes of the brick itself, but you cannot write the thickness of that wall we want to design. This is just material. So keep this in your mind, not to write the thickness in the name of the material. So it was RVT brick brown. Now the settings. First of all, the color, which is brown. Then the surface pattern. We don't have a background either. Actually, background is not that much useful. It was just in that concrete. Now we go to foreground, and I said surface pattern must be model, real patterns, and then we, for example, choose this one. Now the cut pattern, I don't want the background, it's none. Then I click on the foreground and choose this one. So I create a material which is called brick brown, and this is the surface pattern and this is the cut pattern. And the function still has one layer, so it's structure. Alright, did you learn it all? So now you can see it in our list in here. Now let me design the last wall too very quickly. I said that if the wall is not activated, we cannot duplicate. So I click on wall first, choose a model, and then click on edit type, duplicate, W03 slash, then clay. It doesn't have a finish either. Then structure edit, thickness 10 centimeters. And actually clay is like brick too. So I duplicate it. And don't say these are all alike, we will fix it in the rendering. So I write clay and, for example, cream as the color. Then I will choose a color, cream. The surface pattern must be model, and I choose one for it. The cut pattern, which is drafting, I choose one. And that's it. The thickness and the material and the function are all right. And it's over. Now we have designed 3 default types. Okay? Now, there are 2 ways to use these. Either we go to the properties and say which one we want to use, and then draw it. Just like that. All 3 types. I mean, first we select and then we draw. The second way is that, for example, we have already drawn some walls in another type, for example, generic. For example, this way. And now we want to transfer these. Like the layers in CAD, for example, we want to draw a line in a layer. At first we can activate the layer and then draw it, or transfer some of these lines to that layer. For example, now I drew these with generic, so I can select them all and say, for example, all of these go to, for example, this concrete one. Also remember that when your list gets too long, you can get some help from this most recently used types. So I want to make all of these concrete. I click on this. Now I want to make the interior ones brick. So I click on brick. Then I want to make this one clay. So I click on it. You see, you can move them really easily. You can also use the match properties. For example, you have a generic wall here and you want it to be concrete. So from the modify headline here, you can see match type properties. Its shortcut is MA. You pick it up and you say, make this one look like this one. And if there were multiple of them, you can open a box. For example, I have 3 walls. I want all of them to be concrete. So I go to match properties. I select this and then click on select multiple. Open a box and finish. So we can either use properties to change the model or use the match properties. Alright, now here's a question. Why cannot we see their patterns or even their color? Well, let's see the setting. Here we have something called detail level. But what does it do? It controls the amount of showing the details. Controlling the amount of showing the details. And it has 3 kinds. The first one is coarse. which is nearly no details. Coarse means rough actually. Medium, well, it is like 50%. And fine is like everything. Now it's on fine and you can see the patterns. Alright, now a point. Now, if I go to the 3D, I can see the patterns, but what matters here is that even if I click on coarse, still the patterns can be seen. So what is the point? The detail level does not affect the surface patterns. Now, why cannot we see the color in the plan? Well, it's clear because the plan is on hidden line now. If we click on shade, you can see the color too. So the patterns were activated by the detail level and the color by clicking on the shaded. In 3D we have the same thing. If it's on hidden line, we cannot see the color. If it's on shaded, we can see the colors. The only difference was that the surface pattern can be seen in the 3D no matter what. Or in the view, the surface pattern can be seen. Shaded shows the color, but this has no effect anymore. Now, about size of the patterns, you might wonder how to make them a bit tighter. Well, I should tell you that now is not the right time to explain this. In the ultimate sessions, I will talk about them and don't worry about anything. If you're in a hurry, you can watch the sessions earlier, but I don't suggest. Please design these 3 kinds of the wall again and then continue. I don't think this is a good idea to continue these without designing these types again. Imagine you're sitting in your classroom and you have to practice. This is the best way. We have to work on this system until the end, and I will keep reminding you that we should practice first and then continue.